We are all arranged in different ways, but exactly how these mechanisms will affect our actions in certain circumstances remains a mystery. That is, I don't believe that we can predict how we will react to situations that will really change our lives. I remember when both my parents were alive, I thought I could get over their deaths in peace. That was until my mother died. Even though I was 21 years old and seemed like an adult, it shook me to the core. When I was alone with myself, I panicked, and for several months I could barely control myself in public. On the other hand, when I was 19, I was going on a date and we were attacked by two guys. I didn't even think about what I would do next, I just reacted, even though I'm not a karate champion or anything like that. I wasn't much bigger than the robbers, and one of them had a knife. I pulled my companion behind me with one hand, at the same time hitting the guy with a knife in the balls, and then I hit the other guy in the face with my elbow, so that blood gushed in all directions from his obviously broken nose. I tried to stab the guy with the knife again, but they ran away, and the one who was hitting the balls was pretty slow. I rushed after them, but my companion pulled me back. The essence of these two stories, which were the most dramatic in my life before I wrote this story, although there were dozens of other, smaller ones, is that I could not predict my reaction to significant events. I married Teresa after we had been dating for only a few months and shortly after my mother's death. Teresa had never met my mother, but she helped me get rid of the malaise that I felt after her death. I quickly fell head over heels in love with Teresa, and it seemed to me that these feelings were mutual. Teresa seemed to me a beauty, with beautiful hips that drove me crazy, and a pleasant, charming smile. However, what I liked most about her was her kindness and cheerful nature. I considered myself a nice, easygoing guy, and she seemed to appreciate that about me too. We got married 6 months after we met. Although I tried never to dwell on it, sometimes I wondered what my reaction would be if Teresa ever cheated on me. Although in those few minutes when I allowed myself to think about it, I always thought that if the circumstances hadn't been completely strange, I probably would have forgiven her and we would have continued our life together. The only real effect these fleeting thoughts usually had on me was the certainty that I was making Teresa happy in the first place. After we had been married for 4 years, and when we started talking about children, which we both always said we wanted to have after 3 or 4 years of marriage, Teresa had a change of mood that lasted about 3 weeks. It was not a typical premenstrual period, which she had never had a particularly difficult one. When I asked her about her illness, she either laughed or brushed it off, or gave some lame answer that stress reigned at work. She worked as a personal trainer. How stressful can it be? And then one Friday evening, when I returned from work to our 2-bedroom apartment, I heard the words that every man fears the most. "Blake, darling, we need to talk." I swallowed and sat down in the living room opposite where she was sitting, sipping wine from a glass with a kind of detached expression on her face. "Would you like something to drink, dear?" "What is it?" she asked. "No, I'm fine," I replied. "Is this related to your illness in the last 3 weeks?" "Yes, probably. The thought of having children makes me anxious and dissatisfied. I have some kind of longing. What I need to do is take some time off from our marriage until I get my thoughts in order. Then we can be together forever again and have 3 or 4 children." "Vacation? What the hell does that mean? We're not college professors." I probably bellowed rather than answered. "Don't be rude, honey. Just a short break. Probably not for more than a month," she replied, avoiding my eyes. "I don't remember a vacation being in our vows or plans," I retorted. "I know, but it's complicated for me. I just really need to get some rest." "Where are you going? Because I'm staying here," I replied, hopefully in a more conciliatory tone. "My friend Karen has a 2-bedroom apartment from work, and her roommate just moved out, so I can stay there for a month or as long as it takes." It was only then that I noticed that our 2 largest suitcases were packed and standing near the front door. "Very observant of me, isn't it? I'll call you in a day," she said, getting up and coming over to me after finishing her wine. I got up too. I hugged her. "Please don't go," I said, my voice breaking. "I need to, honey. I love you," she replied, kissing me with a thoughtful expression on her face. "Will you help me with the suitcases?" she asked with a smile and another quick kiss. I followed her to her car, carrying the suitcases like some brainless porter. I put them in the trunk and once again asked her not to leave. In response, she only gave me one more quick kiss and left, waving goodbye. I kept myself in check until I got back to my apartment. And then I lost my temper like the day my mom died. All weekend I've been thinking only about how to get Teresa back. I'm sure the messages I left on Teresa's mobile phone were touching. Although she thanked me for the roses I sent her at work when she called me. I answered after the first ring, and I had the feeling that in her eyes it was also a pathetic answer. In fact, it seemed like the next 3 weeks were a real challenge for me. Of course, my situation has affected my work, but fortunately, I have a job where I don't have to interact too much with others if I don't want to, and an understanding boss. However, even she caught my mood, and after about 2.5 weeks of my despair, on Wednesday morning, she asked me a serious question. What the hell is wrong with you, Blake? In the last 3 weeks, you've gone from being one of my two best employees to a useless pile of shit. Why do you have your head in your ass? Belinda asked me. As you can see, Belinda is not confused in words and has an amazing character. She's 5 years older than me. She is smart, and although her appearance is slightly above average, she is about 180 centimeters tall, and her figure is as amazing as her character. I'm sorry, Belinda. I'm having some personal issues that are distracting me. My wife took a vacation from our marriage. What did you say? Stop it, she snapped. Well, that means… I began to explain meekly. Even though I'm 10 centimeters taller than her, I seem like a little kid looking up at her before she loudly interrupted me. I know what the hell that's supposed to mean. I'm wondering why you're so spineless that you agree to this. I didn't think you were weak, Blake. While I was stuttering and trying to answer, she grabbed my shoulders with her hands, which were incredibly strong even for a woman with muscular arms and legs. Stop trying to explain or justify something. This is your own business, and if you want to be a fucking bore outside the office, I can't stop it. However, you have 3 more working days to bring back Blake, who is one of my best employees. If you don't do it in 3 days, I'll send you on a sabbatical. Understood? Damn, she was scary. Got it, I said dutifully. By this time on Monday. What time is it? At 10:30? She continued. Yes, that's about it, I replied. Okay, I'll see old Blake by 10:30 on Monday, or I'll suspend you from work for 2 weeks, without pay. With that, she stroked my cheek, something that should have been gentle for her, and even for an ordinary woman would have been to some extent gentle, turned around and went back to her office. I was still acting like a sucker on a Saturday night. I still lived in anticipation of Teresa's calls and was concerned about how to get her back, despite my desire to gain the firmness of character that Belinda demanded of me. I decided to go to the cinema to take my mind off my problems, but alone, not with a friend. And then I saw them. There was Teresa, with a big smile on her face, holding hands with a guy whose physique, in my opinion, was very different from mine, and waiting in line for tickets. I immediately went home with a broken heart. I went straight to bed, suddenly realizing that I was emotionally exhausted. When I woke up at 8 a.m. on Sunday, I had a new outlook on life. I found that my programmed reaction was very different from what I had previously assumed. Although I can't say that I didn't care about Teresa anymore, because I really loved her, my whole approach was 180 degrees different from what it was before, or from what I could have predicted. I gathered my friends, and we played mini football. 3 of them went to lunch with me, and after that I started looking for a new apartment. We lived month after month in our apartment after the lease expired, and there were 25 days left until the end of the current month, so I could rent out the apartment with 15 days' notice and return the security deposit. I went to look at 3 of them and found one 2 blocks from my office that was quite acceptable and that I could move into on the last day of the current month. I was on a roll at work on Monday morning. Old Blake added 20%. Belinda didn't say anything. She just smiled. On Monday, at lunchtime, I met with my old friend who had recently divorced and received from her a recommendation from a divorce lawyer. Take the one my ex-husband had, she laughed. He's the meanest shark in the water when necessary, but he's smart when necessary, she continued, writing down his name and phone number. I called him before I went back to work and made an appointment for Wednesday. As part of my transformation, I was still at work at 6:30 p.m. Belinda was the only one there besides me. When Teresa called me on my cell phone, I switched the call to voicemail. I was walking out the door at the same time as Belinda. I see you took my advice to heart, she chuckled as we entered the elevator together. Yes, damn it. I didn't want you to kick my ass. I grinned back. Are you going home to your empty apartment? What is it? She asked. No, I'm going to work out first, I replied, picking up my gym bag, and then have a snack. And you? The same thing, she laughed, picking up her gym bag. Where do you train? I asked. At Planet Fitness on the corner of Harvey and Forest, she replied. And you? At Planet Fitness on the corner of 23rd, I laughed. Come to my place for Harvey tonight, and after training, I'll buy you dinner to welcome you back to life, she smiled. Agreed, I retorted. Training with Belinda was bad for 3 reasons. It was hard not to catch my eye when I admired her hot body as she groaned and moaned. It was humiliating that, with the exception of some upper body exercises, she could compete with me or surpass me in everything related to equipment. She was my boss. It was great to train with Belinda for 2 reasons. She had the aforementioned amazing body that really inspired me, and she also seemed to know everyone, and it was impossible not to be happy around her, especially when everyone greeted her and she introduced me to them. After practice, we had a nice platonic dinner at the Olive Garden and just waved goodbye to each other. Although that evening, for the first time in my life, I looked at Belinda as an object and not as my boss. I just didn't answer Teresa's calls for the next 2 days, including one time when I was waiting for an appointment at the office of a famous lawyer. His name was Bill Betts. I told Betts that I just wanted to get divorced because of irreconcilable differences and did not want to go into details with him. He insisted that I tell the whole story if I wanted him to represent me, so I gave him a brief overview and answered about 20 leading questions. Okay, Blake, I'll represent you. Here is the price list of my fees, he said after receiving a satisfactory answer to the last question. My eyebrows went up. It may not be cheap, but with the attitude I had towards life right now, I would consider this money well spent in case something gets complicated. You should be prepared for your wife's lawyer to offer advice. And if he or she does, 3 out of 4 judges in this jurisdiction will agree to it. How do we find the 4th judge? I chuckled. Luck in the draw. Sorry, there's nothing I can do to affect it. However, ultimately, it shouldn't cost you that much, since you don't have children and don't have much money to break up. It will just be an inconvenience, because you will have to pretend that you are taking part, even if you are categorically against reconciliation. You're totally against it, aren't you? Betts replied. Absolutely. I replied, not laughing or giggling, but with every possible serious expression on my face. When will the documents be ready? I can do everything in 10 days, or even less, including my special bailiff. Why do we need a special bailiff? I asked. He will accompany you and serve the process with you, either completely quietly and unnoticeably, or he will make a scene of your choice. Thank you, Mr. Betts, I said, getting up to shake his hand. I'm Bill, and you're Blake, and no, mister, he replied, shaking my hand. And send Teresa an email about the apartment 2 days before you notify your landlord. That evening, I received 3 more calls and an email from Teresa. I didn't answer any of them. I think she was wondering why I wasn't kissing her ass anymore. The next day, I sent Teresa a quick email reply. I'll notify the landlord tomorrow that I'm moving out unless you sign a new lease yourself. I have another apartment that I'm moving into on the last day of the month. If you don't tell me that you're going to sign a new lease yourself by 5 o'clock tomorrow, I'll notify the landlord about it. I received 10 emails from her, as well as 10 calls, none of which I answered but simply deleted. Around 8 o'clock in the evening, the door of my apartment opened and Teresa came in. Of course, she still had her own key, and technically she still lived here, so it didn't surprise me. I couldn't get through to you, and I was already really worried, were her first words. Why didn't you answer my calls and emails? Because apart from the status of the apartment, you can't say anything that would interest me even a little, I replied, turning up the volume of the basketball game I was watching. She got between me and the TV. Please turn off the TV so we can talk, she said, putting her hands on her hips, clearly worried. No, I really enjoy this game. Maybe we'll talk after it's over or during the commercial, I replied. She reached out and turned off the TV. We need to talk, she said, sitting down, but holding the fork in her hand, probably so that I couldn't reach it. What's so important that you're interrupting my pleasure? I asked. Don't you have any business on vacation? That's what we need to talk about. I think the vacation was a mistake, and I'm coming back tomorrow so that we can start having a baby in a couple of months, she said, and her former stern expression was replaced by a wide smile, as if this was the best news in the world. Who are you planning to have children with? I asked thoughtfully. What? With you, of course, was her irritated reply. I'm sorry, Teresa, but during our vacation, I came to some real discoveries. I realized that I never loved you. You were just a good partner. And by the way, you were a good partner, I replied, first frowning and then smiling. However, I have no intention of having children with you or staying married for even a day longer than necessary. I can file for divorce at any time convenient for you. I don't want to interfere with your important vacation matters. At first, she looked stunned, then surprised, and then a sly smile appeared on her face, and she stood up, heading towards me, dropping the plug from the TV on the way. I understand, dear. You want to punish me a little for my stupid vacation idea. I could tell she was caught off guard again. However, it was also clear that she didn't believe me and thought it was part of the game. So after a 30-second delay, she smiled and said, "All right, my love." When I entered the bedroom, she was lying on the bed. She thought I was joking. "I don't do that," she chuckled. "Then I need to get back to the game," I replied and started to get up. She sat me back down with a mocking expression on her face. This was replaced by a forced smile. "It's part of my punishment, isn't it?" "What is it?" she asked. The next morning I got up before Teresa and made myself breakfast. I was halfway done when she came into the kitchen. "It smells good," she cooed. "Or maybe I just have all my senses heightened," she giggled. I didn't answer. "Where's my breakfast?" "What is it?" she asked, looking at the plate with the remains of the omelet I was eating. "The eggs are in the fridge," I replied casually, pointing at him. A very puzzled expression appeared on her face, and then she sat down next to me. "So, what are we going to do after work today?" "What is it?" she asked hopefully. "I do not know what you're going to do, but I'm going to study and then have a quick dinner," I replied. I thought that after yesterday's repentance, we could do something together tonight," she replied hesitantly. "Last night wasn't a punishment. I have to say that you have surpassed yourself." Although Teresa is not used to me talking to her like that, how could she not take it as a compliment? "You see, you missed me," she began when I got up, rinsed my plate, put it in the dishwasher, and smiled. "Goodbye. Maybe we can do it again sometime." I was sure I heard her say but, as I was walking out the door, but I'm not sure because I never looked back. That day at work, I received several love messages and emails from Teresa. I didn't answer. I actually canceled the apartment rental agreement when Teresa didn't call me until 1700 hours. In addition, in the morning I called Bill Betts and asked if the documents could be ready to be sent by the bailiff at 8 a.m. on Monday to our apartment. He grumbled, but agreed. That weekend was probably the most amazing in my life. Although Teresa has always been a great partner, she obviously wasn't sure if I was playing with her about getting divorced and moving to another apartment or not. A knock on the door disturbed her mood. "Who could be here at 8 in the morning?" She was puzzled. "I'll open it." "This is for you," I said, going to the door and opening it. "Mr. Applegate, I suppose," I said to a well-dressed man in a 60s style who stood in the doorway with a fedora in his hand. "It must be me," he said in response. "Teresa, this is for you. Just come in a bathrobe, but don't open it. We don't want Mr. Applegate to have a heart attack." I giggled, and he laughed. Teresa approached us cautiously. "You're Teresa Hansen, aren't you?" Mr. Applegate asked in his friendliest tone. Yes, it's me," she replied. "I have something for you," he continued, handing her a manila envelope. After Teresa took it, he said politely, "Mrs. Hansen served you. Have a nice day," and, putting on a soft hat, headed for the elevator. "What is it?" "What is it?" she asked, turning to me. "Well, these are the divorce papers," I replied. "What, but," she stammered. Then she didn't seem to believe me, so she tore open the envelope and looked inside. She began to sob. "I love you. I don't want to get divorced." These are some of the words she mumbled between sobs. I put my arm around her shoulders. "Teresa, look at me. I was very serious when I told you that your vacation made me reconsider our relationship. I think you're a goddess, but I don't love you, and we're getting divorced. If you want to continue the relationship, I don't mind if you understand that this is not a reconciliation." She began to sob even harder, and now her comments were completely unintelligible. I went to work. Apparently, she didn't leave. Early in the morning, I got a call from the landline of our apartment. I answered the phone. Still sobbing softly, Teresa said, "Blake, the building manager is here, and he wants to show us our apartment. He said you filed a notice of termination." I told you I'd do it if you didn't want to sign a new lease by Friday afternoon. He may still let you register, but you can't stop him from showing you the apartment, I replied. But I can't afford it, she wailed. Then let him show you the place. Listen, I have to get back to work, I replied and hung up. Teresa has finally come to terms with reality. She hired a lawyer and rented an apartment on a monthly basis, obviously believing that we would somehow get back together anyway. The last Saturday of the month has finally arrived. I moved all my belongings to the new apartment, except for 2 things in the second bedroom, and Teresa was going to move all her furniture, including all the furniture for the master bedroom that I gave her, although we were far from settling the property issue, to the storage room. On Thursday, she told me, on Saturday, the guys from my job will come to me to help me move our things to the warehouse. Can you help? Teresa, I already told you, I need professional movers to help you. I'll even pay for them. I don't want the guys from your job here. Why not? What is it? She asked. Of course, the main reason was that I was pretty sure that the guy who held hands with her in the movie was one of her colleagues, and I didn't want to make a scene. Because I need professional movers, not a stage, I replied, crossing my arms over my chest. There won't be a scene, she replied, stamping her foot. Please don't forget to hire professionals. Otherwise, it could be almost as big a mistake as your vacation, I shouted over my shoulder before leaving. For some reason, Teresa decided to challenge my decree that only professionals should be movers. 3 guys from her job came in on Saturday morning. One of them, as I expected, was the guy who held her hand in the movie. What are you 3 doing here? I asked bluntly. Hey, don't be so hostile, dude. One of the 3 said, we're just here to help Teresa move in. I told her to go to the professionals. I snapped. Teresa, who was standing nearby, blushed and started to say something, but the same chatty dude sarcastically remarked, obviously, she's not listening to you. He didn't finish because my fist hit his lips before he could do it. Listen, asshole, don't you dare come into my house and talk my teeth out. Do you understand? I shouted, pointing at him with my finger. They're innocent, Blake. Don't get mad at them. Teresa whined. Innocent? I asked. Let me ask you a question. Which one of you guys used Teresa? Blake, she screamed. All 3 guys were quiet, especially the one who was trying to check if I dislocated his jaw. Don't touch the stuff in the second bedroom, you assholes, and don't use it in my apartment, I growled, heading for the door. The guy who was with Teresa at the movies made the mistake of saying, hey dude, don't be rude, and touched my arm as I was rushing past. I grabbed his arm, twisted it, and stepped over it in one of the few judo moves I knew. I brought my face as close to his as possible in that position. Don't tell me what to do, asshole, and don't touch me, or I'll break your arm up to the elbow. The healing period is at least 4 months. Teresa kept shouting over and over again, don't hurt him, Blake, please. The other 2 guys seemed about to take a step towards me when their buddy yelped. One more step and I'll break his arm, and then, I assure you, I'll kick both your asses, I growled. They retreated. I pushed the guy with the twisted arm to the floor, somehow mustering enough self-control not to break it, and left. After the moving incident, I didn't think Teresa would object to the divorce. I was thinking wrong. Her lawyer went to court for advice, and we turned to one of the 4 judges who usually rule on divorce. Bill Betts managed to reduce the number of consultations from 10, which Teresa's lawyer insisted on, to 5. The consultations did not bring anything good to either the consultant or Teresa. And this is despite the consultant's best efforts to get me to stop asking this question. Moreover, I usually ended the question with a statement. The only reason that comes to my mind is that you wanted to make love with other guys. Well, now that we're divorced, there won't be any more obstacles. As a rule, it brought Teresa to tears. The consultant scolded me, and I just smiled. When it was time for the last session and there was no progress, Teresa decided to stop all attempts. About 10 minutes into the session, partially in tears, she began to beg. Blake, please forgive me. I wanted to experience something else before we had children. I'm sorry that I was so weak, but if I hadn't, I might have had problems in the future. Now that I've gotten rid of it, I know that no one can satisfy me like you. I desperately need you to forgive me so that we can continue to live the life we planned. Before the vacation, I predicted my reaction like this. I will forgive her, the divorce process will be terminated, and we will completely reconcile. However, pride simply did not allow thoughts about it to prevail in my brain. After a significant pause, I replied, "I'm glad you finally admitted it, Teresa. I'm sure this will serve as a valuable lesson for you in your relationship with your next husband. You are a beautiful woman who, I am sure, will quickly find someone else." However, we are in the past. I got up slowly, thanked the consultant, even though she hadn't done a damn thing, and left, despite the fact that there were still supposedly 30 minutes left before the end of this mandatory consultation. Teresa's sobs in the background didn't touch my heartstrings. Rather, they more or less served as a chorus of hallelujah for the dramatic symbolic dissolution of our marriage. After the last session, Teresa did not resist the divorce. I gave her all the furniture she wanted. We divided our modest savings 50-50, and I agreed to pay her a nominal monthly allowance for 5 years or until she gets married. Perhaps the only woman I talked to in the period between the last consultation and the final divorce was Belinda, with whom I practiced from time to time and went to dinner, always on a platonic basis. However, I really began to appreciate her body and personality more and more. She was fun to be around and make eyes at, even though I was also relieved and proud that I wasn't a doormat. That Friday, when I received the notification that my divorce was final, I still felt like shit. I usually never drink, but for some reason that day, I brought a drink to the office after everyone had left and got drunk alone. Suddenly, Belinda appeared in the doorway, sweaty and in gym clothes. "What are you doing here, Blake? Why the hell are you here?" I replied, "I forgot some papers, so I want to get them after practice." But that's not the answer to my question. I came here because today my divorce became final, and I'm celebrating. "It's more like a drunken pity party than a celebration," she chuckled. I have no idea what came over me. Obviously, partly because of the booze, partly because I hadn't made love in a long time, partly because of my longing, and partly because of how beautiful Belinda looked, but I had the most atypical reaction in my life. Something I could never have predicted. I got up from the table, walked over to Belinda, and hugged her. "I'm going to use you, Belinda," I growled. Her reaction was also not at all what I expected. Belinda is quite big and strong, and in my condition at that time, there was no way I could have made love to her if she hadn't wanted to. "If you do this, you'll be fired." Belinda and I spent the rest of the weekend together at her house. On Monday morning, I submitted my resignation. Belinda gave me excellent recommendations, and 3 weeks later, I got a new job. In between 2 jobs, I spent a week tidying up Belinda's house and moving my stuff into it. After 2 years of living together without a vacation, she stopped taking pills, we got married, and she got pregnant. It looks like I'm going to have to get her pregnant again, and